There have been wars, pandemics, earthquakes, and other natural disasters throughout our history. In spite of the fact that war is one of the tragedies that are caused by humans, it is possible for leaders or politicians to avert it through statesmanship. It is not possible to attribute such wars to the caprices of nature. When they hit, the citizens of the area are subjected to catastrophic repercussions. Towards the end of the 19th century, northern China was the location of the natural disaster that was the deadliest in the history of the planet. The Qing dynasty in China was the time period during which this famine, which is known as the Northern Chinese Famine, 1876-1879, took place. The year 1875 saw the beginning of a drought in northern China, which later led to the failure of a substantial number of crops. Over 13 million people lost their lives out of a total population of 108 million. From the perspective of the Chinese, the 19th century was referred to as the century of humiliation. Almost all of the battles that the vast Manchu Qing dynasty fought against foreign powers were unsuccessful, and at the same time, it exhausted all of its resources by putting down rebellions. There was a huge reduction in regional grain stocks as a result of internal conflicts, such as Yan and Muslim rebellions, which also contributed to the extensive depletion of finances inside the empire. This grain stock was set aside for use in the event of an emergency in the year 1875. In the event of a natural calamity, the conditions of the nation were the worst that could possibly be expected. A severe drought struck the northern region of China at the beginning of the year 1876, negatively impacting agriculture and resulting in the death of crops. Throughout the entirety of China's history, harvests have consistently been miserable. The country had been through a great number of earlier famines. A regulation was established by the Chinese government concerning the reserving of the crops. During the course of 3 years of farming, they made it mandatory for farmers to save 1 year's worth of crops as reserves. Even so, the majority of the reserves had been drained. In the provinces that were affected by the drought, the prices of food surged by a factor of 10 due to the shortages of stores food and the drought. Almost immediately, it became clear that the matter was not even close to being resolved. People were aware that they would perish if the government did not provide any form of aid anytime soon. As a result of the social order that exists in China, families were forced to make the agonizing decision of which members of their family should be fed and which should be abandoned. However, when the drought continued, food became even more limited, and the young girls were the first to experience the consequences of it. Under the influence of the famine, everyone progressively succumbed to its repercussions. Intervention on the part of the state was required in order to stop the crisis from getting worse. For the same reason, concurrently to alleviate the victims. It is possible that the Chinese government could have brought in food from Mongolia or South Manchuria, China. In spite of this, by June of 1876, the authorities were unable to adequately deal with the issues and take the necessary actions since they were too financially strapped and concentrated on the south and the coastlines, respectively. Following the implementation of the government's initial state relief measures, vast quantities of silver coinage were sent to the regions that were suffering from starvation. On the other hand, cash was only of limited use because there was no food available to purchase. As a result of the crisis, the value of money decreased. Although these reliefs appeared to be enormous, they only provided a modicum of alleviation. After the Opium Wars, Christian missionaries who had gained a great deal of power began to offer assistance to those in need. An attempt was made by Timothy Richards, a British missionary, to bring the famine to the attention of people all around the world. Up to the spring of the year 1877, there was neither rain nor snow that fell during the fall and winter seasons. The prices of food had skyrocketed to levels that were unimaginable. Residents of the most impoverished communities in the area who had not yet passed away made a valiant effort to subsist on tree bark and roots. Families that kept cattle or pets were the ones who consumed them. The famine became much worse that year, and a large number of people died of starvation as a result of the failure of the rain. Additionally, it has been alleged that, in order to live, bandit organizations formed and occasionally executed raids against settlements. Persons traveling were detained and either robbed or murdered. A group of Western business people, diplomats, and missionaries of both the Protestant and Catholic faiths arrived to the province of Shandong in order to create a famine relief committee. In a significant way, they assisted the locals. This was one of the earliest examples of relief work in the history of the world. The situation in the other provinces, on the other hand, remained extremely precarious. Those who were starved collapsed to the land. In the streets, bodies began to accumulate on the sides of the roads as they were being driven. When the inhabitants consumed all of the greenery, some of the starving locals resorted to eating mud clay and weathered rocks. This diet was fatal for the majority of those who attempted it because it blocked or ruptured their digestive tract. Cannibalism had become a common practice at that time. Cannibalism was a criminal offense that carried the death sentence for anyone who committed it. Very few magistrates were concerned about the possibility of pursuing the practitioners. This information was reported by Luis Mona, the newly appointed Roman Catholic Bishop of Shanxi, who stated that in the past, people had restricted themselves to eating the corpses. They are now killing the living in order to consume them as food. Husbands ate their wives, parents ate their sons and daughters, and children ate their parents and grandparents. A Chinese district magistrate confirmed these claims, having made them by his own observations. A grandson chopped his grandmother into pieces, boiled, and ate her. Both the desire to assist the victims and the want to spend the resources on strengthening the coastlines in order to fight against foreign aggression caused the government to be split between the two options. It was in November of 1877 when the government initiated an official state aid effort. However, the situation had already deteriorated by that time. Furthermore, cereals were brought from Manchuria and sold at discounted costs after being transported from there. The procedure that is carried out frequently in China, this inhibits individuals from flowing, which in turn prevents mass migration, was considered the most important issue. Qing government could not afford the risk of pillaging or the rise of another rebellion. Human trafficking. With no other option, the parents decided to sell their children, particularly their daughters. Moreover, there were husbands who sold their wives or abandoned them. The majority of these unlucky young girls and women were purchased by merchants, who then carried them to the south and sold them there as mistresses and prostitutes. A lot of times, they were beaten and mistreated. The English newspapers of Shanghai condemned human trafficking and those who were responsible for it, which contributed to the increased attention that the famine received from outside sources, who fraudulently benefited from the calamity, despite the fact that the drought prolonged and cannibalism began to spread more and further. A growing number of individuals also fled in the direction of the south. There was a rapid disappearance of the northern regions. Beginning in the year 1878, the droughts continued to be a problem. Murphy Richard, a British missionary, and his wife made their way to Shaanxi, the region of China that was experiencing the most severe famine. He reviewed the entries that he had made in his famine journal. In addition to eating roots, carrion clay, and leaves, many are tearing down their homes and selling their wives and daughters with them. Cannibalism. When people see people laying helpless by the side of the road, or, if they are dead, being eaten by ravenous dogs and magpies, they are appalled by the news. Nobody is surprised by this sight. Children were boiled and eaten in such a terrifying manner that it caused one to shudder, despite the fact that the Qing authorities and international humanitarian organizations were making significant efforts. As the number of fatalities continued to rise, the famine continued. Around the beginning of 1879, people began to migrate south after giving up all of their hopes up until that point. The outcome of the famine. When, after a prolonged period of waiting for rain, it finally arrived and turned out to be a downpour, it dawned on the locals that their fight was coming to an end. The famine was being alleviated as a result of subsequent harvests that were carried out on soil that had been rehydrated. For the villagers, it was a horrifyingly lengthy nightmare. However, the situation is beginning to improve, but the affected regions, particularly Shanxi, have experienced a significant loss of population as a result of either relocation or mortality. Over 8 million people had been removed from the population, which is roughly equivalent to half of the total population in that region. The result was that between 100 and 200 million individuals across the entire population were affected by famine. During that time period, Chinese officials and scholars made an effort to minimize the numbers in order to draw attention to the foreign colonialism that was being carried out by Western countries. Rather than relying on their assistance, the Qing administration accused British missionaries of attempting to convert believers to Christianity. The natural tragedy that had caused the most deaths in human history had passed, yet the people continues to look down on it. We hope you liked this video. Watch another video here,